Year 10 and 11, welcome to some quick revision on the theme of responsibility in A Christmas Carol. A quick reminder of our assessment objectives on this question then. We've got A01, read, understand and respond to texts. Students should be able to maintain a critical style, develop an informed personal response, use textual references including quotations to support and illustrate interpretation, and that is worth 12 marks. A02 is analyse the language, form and structure used by a writer to create meaning and effect using relevant subject terminology where appropriate, and that is worth 12 marks. And then finally, your A03 is show understanding of the relationship between texts and the context in which they were written, and that is worth 6 marks. In terms of the theme of responsibility then, we're going to start with the quotation, "Mankind was my business." Huge quotation. So Jacob Marley's spirit uses the word business in response to Scrooge's statement that Marley had always been a good man of business during his life. What Scrooge means, obviously, is that Marley had been successful in running an enterprise and a partnership with him. Marley's annoyed by the use of the word business and states that mankind was his business. In other words, he should have taken a greater interest in other people. And then we follow that with the common welfare was my business. He states that he should have been charitable, merciful, patient and kind. And in this quotation we see Dickens' main lesson, which is that of social responsibility. And that is essentially what he uses the novella for. So therefore there's a contrast in the use of the word. Scrooge means enterprise and profit, and Marley means the welfare of other people, more than likely those less fortunate. During his life, Marley's concern was running a business and his focus was profit. So we obviously see where Marley and Scrooge are very, very similar. But this meant that he had no time for anyone and resulted in him being selfish. He is punished with eternal misery and wears chains. But remember, in terms of responsibility, it's the chains that he is responsible for, isn't it? His actions, his lack of social responsibility, his lack of empathy for others has resulted in this punishment. It is for this reason that Marley's ghost states that his business during life should have been to show greater compassion and be more involved with the rest of humanity. So basically for Marley, it is just way too late to learn the lessons of social responsibility, to understand the divide between the rich and the poor. Scrooge is approached in stave 1, isn't he, by 2 men seeking help and donations for charity, and he refuses to donate. Worse than that, he asks if the prisons and the workhouses are still open, which indicates that he sees the poor as a burden to society. This shows a general lack of responsibility, lack of social responsibility, as well as a lack of empathy. Key quotes then: "Are there no prisons? Plenty of prisons. And the union workhouses?" demanded Scrooge. So again, in your analysis there of language, we're talking about the question, are there no prisons, the question of the union workhouses, and this verb demanded. Then we get, "If they would rather die," said Scrooge, "they had better do it to decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that." So he shows Malthusian views here, doesn't he? If you need my video on context with Malthus on, please check it out, or my video on poverty, please check it out. But later on, don't forget, the ghost repeats these words back to Scrooge, doesn't he? About decreasing the surplus population. And what we see here is not just the greedy, selfish Scrooge that we've come to know through the word Scrooge and from the fact that we've seen the film and things like that. But what we find out here is just how cold he really is, in the sense that he thinks they should die. Scrooge feels he's already doing his part to be socially responsible, even though he does it out of obligation. He then refers to the poor as idle. So by using the adjective idle, it shows us that he doesn't understand why the people are poor, and he doesn't understand the complexity of poverty and the difficulty that these people find themselves in. He sees himself as financially responsible and the poor as financially irresponsible. Dickens then uses Fred to link the idea of Christmas to the idea of social responsibility, and Fred argues that the value of Christmas is a time when people, quote, think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave. So the key quotes are at the top there. If we just do a quick analysis of the one in blue. So that was, think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave. So there's a connection created here between Christmas time and fellowship and community. Although the word below reminds the reader very subtly of the social hierarchy and the class system. This quotation implies that people are more charitable and kind at Christmas. Social responsibility is the message behind the novella, but it would seem that industrialisation is a factor which has created a larger divide between the classes. Make sure that as part of your context revision you do check industrialisation. I'm not going to discuss that here, but check out, as I say, all the videos, context and things like that for the background that you need, especially for those 6 marks. Another key quote, I'm not going to dwell on it for too long, but a key quote if you need one is this as well. To any kindly given, to a poor one most. So Scrooge basically must learn to change his ways. He must give to charity and look after the poor, such as the Cratchit family. Another key quote to follow that as well, just a simple one. His wealth is no use to him, he don't do any good with it. If you check those quotations I've just given you, they both employ short sentence structures, so you want to be analysing that in your answer. They highlight a shift in tone, the fact that Scrooge has to transform. These short sentences are very abrupt in terms of the lessons that they are trying to teach as well. Obviously in the quotation on this slide, wealth is linked to doing something good, doing something kind to help others. Ignorance and want are also massively important in terms of the theme of responsibility. So the children of mankind, aren't they? Mankind is responsible for these children. They are described with the adjective horrible. The suggestion is that these traits are the creation of society due to the treatment of the poor. So again, we are responsible for these children because of the way we treat those less fortunate. And we get this quote, from the folding of its robe it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. Look at your list of adjectives there. Consider when we're analysing this quotation what it is that Dickens is trying to show us about society as a result of our actions. The idea that they're miserable, hideous, frightful. So we can analyse these adjectives as single words as well. Also, don't avoid the fact that they are called ignorance and want. Think about analysing those 2 words as well and these characteristics that we're being shown. I don't expect you to remember the massive quotation, but here it is if you need it. They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meagre, ragged, scowling, wolfish. Consider why they look wolfish, why they look like animals. Is Dickens telling us or trying to subtly tell us that we are behaving like animals by mistreating the human race? Carry on. But prostrate too in their humility, where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints, a stale and shrivelled hand, like that of age, had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Look at your verbs there. Twisted them, pulled them. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out menacing. Think about the idea that there's devils, and think biblically why Dickens has used those here. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade. Through all the mysteries of wonderful creation has monsters half so horrible and dread. So again, there's absolutely loads of things we can analyse in there, whether it be single words, whether it be should have. Look at that phrase there, and the contrast we have as well. A lot of your words in this passage contrast with one another, so we have a lot of juxtapositions such as graceful versus shrivelled, youth versus age. So again, think about what it is that Dickens through his language is trying to show us in terms of social responsibility and what has happened to society because of the actions of people like Scrooge and Marley. Why is it that the devils lurk? The devil, don't forget, contrasts with angel. So there's a lot of language in there. So the Ghost of Christmas Present warns that ignorance will lead to doom. Again, a single word quotation we can use. The doom of Scrooge himself and society overall. Dickens thinks the lack of education received by the poor should be addressed. Tiny Tim is the obvious connection between poverty and death, and Scrooge saves him, and herein lies the message of social responsibility. The rich can make a difference to the lives of the poor. Just a quick aside there, Dickens, when he wrote A Christmas Carol, he visited a school and he was appalled by what he saw. And the school he visited was for the poorest children, and it was to teach them basic reading and writing. He travelled through the streets of London making observations about what he saw as well. And Victorian London was a place of extremes. In the 1800s, the population was around 1 million, and it was going through the Industrial Revolution. So therefore, the city was caught in two places, I suppose. It was reaping the benefits, but also suffering the consequences, because there was new buildings, new railroads, which made the population grow until it reached 4.5 million people by 1889. And therefore, the upper and the middle class lived right next to the poor people, the poverty-stricken people. And, you had the poor street sweepers trying to clean the streets. You had pickpockets, you had prostitutes, you had drunks, beggars. And this was just everyday life in London. Again, this isn't a massive rant about context, so please check out the context video. But don't forget, the poor law will probably need to be mentioned as well. Malthus will need to be mentioned in his beliefs. And the idea that Victorian children worked in factories and the conditions that they worked in. They worked long, hard hours because obviously they were so poor and the conditions of employment were terrible. The children would suffer illness. And therefore the rate of mortality was very high. And a lot of poor children didn't even go to school. Hence this idea of education needing to be addressed. Okay, then we're coming to Fezziwig. Again, huge quotation. I don't expect you to remember it all. It's just if you need ideas. So we get it. Isn't that, said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self. It isn't that spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. See that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant, that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. So we get a juxtaposition here of happy and unhappy, and light and burdensome. This section suggests Fezziwig has control over his apprentices and has the ability to influence their emotions. Look at the word power. And the use of language emphasises the idea that Fezziwig is responsible for the apprentices' welfare and their experiences. There appears to be a change in Scrooge here as well, because his earlier statement to Marley, remember, was a good man of business, and that showed us Scrooge's values at the beginning of the novella. But now there's a change, because when he says the phrase as if it cost a fortune, there's a moment of understanding here, the understanding that value is not only measured in cost. And as I said, this contrasts with Scrooge's earlier conversation with Fred, where he complained about Christmas, and when he said that Christmas had never made Fred richer. Okay, so this is a key moment. But also in terms of Fezziwig, we see this idea that he is responsible for his workers. And a little bit more on Fezziwig then is the party. When we watch the guests come to the party, we get in came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having board enough from his master. So Fezziwig's guests include a variety of people. The boy above appears to be hungry and underfed. So by inviting him, the implication is that Fezziwig is trying to improve society and improve the community through acts of kindness. And therefore he acts as a foil to Scrooge in this section, because he upholds his social responsibility by supporting others. And the transformation at the end with the quotation, "A Merry Christmas, Bob, I'll raise your salary." We probably want to be looking at the word raise here. So finally, Scrooge shows an understanding of injustice. He understands now the huge gap between the rich and the poor, and shows a change in his attitude. So overall, the theme of responsibility is really shown through the ghosts, isn't it? Because they have to teach Scrooge to accept that his values and his moral values are in fact very selfish. I suppose to some degree as well, Dickens is teaching the reader about social responsibility and looking after mankind, looking after one another. I hope this was useful. It was just some quick revision. It wasn't anything in massive detail. If you need any of my other videos on A Christmas Carol, please check out my YouTube channel. Just type Stacey Reay in and please subscribe. And if you need anything on Twitter where I tweet out key quotes, links to videos and revision, or you want to ask me anything on Twitter, then it's @_Stacey_English. Massive good luck in your English literature exam.